Hello and welcome back to another episode of Soccer Supernova with me, Amy Canavan, a State of Mind's dedicated football chat show. Today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by former Aberdeen Rangers and Leeds United defender Davy Robertson. Davy, how you doing?
I'm good. Yep. Try to get back to normal as best I can.
Absolutely, that's fantastic, and thank you for joining us. And obviously, a lot of people now know you for being out in India, but we are pleased to say obviously you're back in Aberdeen now, so everything's okay.
Yeah, everything's fine. Yeah, I've been back for 6 weeks now. Last year we were stuck in India for 49 days, so a little bit easier exit this year than it was last year for sure.
How have you found the last year coping? Obviously, it's been a lot, like you say, the virus out in India has been a bit up and down as well.
Yeah, it's been difficult. I mean, as I say, we're locked in. Myself, my wife, and my son Mason were locked in Kashmir for 49 days and had a horrendous journey back. Got repatriated home, and then we had a nice time at home, and we're fortunate enough that we're enjoying life at home, and then we go back to India for 3 months or 4 months, and we're basically in a bubble, stuck in hotels all the time. So it was actually very, very difficult. Only allowed out an hour and a half each day. So it took its toll on everybody. We started off well in the season. It just sort of petered out a little bit. And now, lucky enough, the season finished in time to get out because India's in a horrendous state just now. So I noticed the IPL cricket players, some of them are stranded there now. So we were very, very fortunate to get out. I couldn't have handled, reaching out to government for the second time and asking to get repatriated, and they'll be thinking, "Look at this idiot! Doesn't learn from the first time."
Exactly, doesn't he learn? So as you say, you're back home, and that's where it all really started. Obviously, growing up in Aberdeen, did you always want to be a footballer?
Well, it didn't really. It wasn't. I mean, I started playing when I was eight years old, which is quite late for Scottish boys. And I wasn't really interested in playing, to be honest. It wasn't until my dad was desperate for me to play football. I wasn't interested, and it wasn't until Aberdeen won the League Cup in 1976 where my mum and dad took me down to Union Street, open top bus, bought me the flags, and after that I was hooked on the game, and tried to make my way into football. But as from that day, I was just totally hooked on it. Willie Miller, Joe Harper, all those legendary players at Aberdeen. But my career didn't really start off too well. I was a little bit, like I said, a little bit behind all the other kids. So I had a trial for the school team and unfortunately didn't make it. And then there was a call off. I think someone was ill or I couldn't make it. I was a sub and actually got put on and then subbed off. So you could tell how bad I was at the start. So a lot of practice after that, but my career didn't go off to the greatest start. And I think that's the sort of the way that happened at the start, in the school, a primary school it was at that point. I think it throughout my whole career, I sort of suffered a little bit from a lack of confidence in my own ability, and I think it all stemmed from being pretty hopeless at the start.
So when did you eventually get into like boys clubs locally? Obviously, as you say, you eventually everything turned out not too bad.
Yeah, no, I ended up. We had a thing in Aberdeen called Champion Street, and in those days it was. I think it was the summer holidays. If you live 500 yards from a street, one of the dads took it, and I ended up at one point. I ended up playing in the final at Pataudry, which was a great occasion. I think when I was 12 years old, but quickly I began to play a lot. Back then there was obviously no internet. I think it was only two TV stations. There was just nothing, no Xboxes, nothing to do. All you did was play football, and lucky enough, obviously I got better and better. Played boys club, or like I said, played in the Championship team, Garth Gola, and played for D-side boys club. And I only ever played for that club. I never played for any other club. So a pretty loyal kind of guy. But I remember when I first started, I think it was 9 years old, 9 or 10, when you play in the boys club, and there was nothing under 14. That was the youngest you could play. So you'd run around for 2 years, not touching the ball, just getting kicked. But it did help you a lot. But the weird thing was, I think I got to about 11 years old, and they put me up to the under 16. So I didn't understand the logic in the whole thing. But I think Aberdeen's a small place, so I think that helped me. It just I think that's why I stayed at the same club. The guy that took the team basically was from the area that I lived in, so it was easy, handy, and I never really liked coming out of my comfort zone, particularly then.
Like you say, you were quite a loyal guy. So how did Aberdeen eventually come around? As you say, you are a fan. You've got into that sort of hysteria. How did they sort of approach you?
Well, I was eventually in my last year at primary school. I got in the Aberdeen Primary School Select. I don't know if you remember the guy Andy Smith that played at Airdrie and Dunfermline, and he was in that team. So there was two of us that ended up to going on to have a decent career. But once we went to secondary school, that team finished. But on a Monday night, Aberdeen would take that group in on a Monday night, and you'd train for the next year until the next batch came in. I think it was just to look to see if there was any players that we would take. And it's on the Ash Park opposite the main doors at Pittodrie. So you'd either train or you play against Highland League teams. And, being out in Aberdeen, you didn't know anything about Blaze pitches or nothing. That's the only one in Aberdeen. And that was a real eye-opener, getting kicked by adults, sliding tackles and all sorts of stuff. But Alec Ferguson, with his attention to detail, would always come to the game, the car park, as we called it, on the Monday nights. And I remember my dad came to watch, and he overheard Alec Ferguson talking to Lenny Taylor about, the lad Robertson and what have you. And shortly after that, Lenny actually called and asked me to sign S forms for Aberdeen. So a pretty proud moment, obviously for myself, but my dad being a season ticket holder at Aberdeen, and a very proud father.
Absolutely, and you touched on it there. Obviously, Alex Ferguson's attention to detail. So even at that age when you weren't directly associated really with Aberdeen, he knew your name and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, even before I signed S forms, there was one time my dad couldn't take me to the training that night on the Monday night. I think I was maybe 13 or 14, I think 13, I think it was. And obviously he'd come and watch it. I was waiting at a bus stop to go home, and he would stop, ask me get in and give me a lift home. And the attention to detail was that he didn't even knew where I lived. He didn't ask, but he knew where I lived. Took me straight to the door, because obviously when you go into his car, you're absolutely terrified to say anything. He'll ask you a question, you'll say yes, no, yes, no. And he took me straight to the door. And to this day, obviously, it just shows you that he knew everything. I mean, he knew every player in boys club, not just those associated with Aberdeen, but in boys clubs and the Highland League. And his knowledge was just incredible. And he would just travel. He'd go and watch Highland League games, and even games that had no effect on Aberdeen or himself. He would just always be watching football.
I appreciate, obviously, he hadn't quite hit the heights yet, obviously, of Man United and that, but you said you lacked confidence. Him knowing your name, picking you up, and having that kind of connection, that must have been a little bit of a confidence boost.
Yeah, well, I think when obviously I was playing the primary school select, and I didn't realise, until later on in my life, that I was actually one of the better players in the team, and I didn't really know. And then when I signed S forms, I was just totally delighted. A little bit thinking I'm a little bit lucky, but I think around about 14 and 15, I started to play in the reserves, and then I realised that I've maybe got something here. I still played boys club. It was actually weird. You maybe playing a reserve game at night, and you take two buses, you still got your school uniform on, and you're away to play. I remember one the reserve game, we played against Rangers reserves, and Derek Johnston was playing as a centre back, and John McDonald was playing. And here's me showing up with my school uniform on to go and play. But it was a great grounding for me. But I think I soon realised that I played left winger at that point, and I soon realised that I wasn't good enough to play in that position. I quickly found out, because I think it was a little bit false. I was 14 or 15. You're playing against guys in their 30s, and I was a winger, and I couldn't get past anybody, and I really began to doubt myself at that point.
So that frustration sort of comes in, like you say, you're playing through the reserve, making your Aberdeen debut, breaking into that first team. You're still really quite young.
Yeah, I was 17, and it was a bizarre, real situation, because what Alec Ferguson would do, I actually played a pre-season game in the first team, but what he did was, it was against Dunfermline, he takes everybody down to, you'll take 13 or 14 first team players, experienced guys, then you'll take about 7 or 8 young kids, not even in the team, just to put the kit out, carry the hampers and what have you. And I'll never forget, you get to the stadium, East End Park, it was about 6:30, kickoff was 7:30, and I'm putting the kit out, and I sit down, and I get told that I'm starting in the game, and I think he did that because he didn't want me to think about it.
Yeah.
I didn't have time to think. I just went out and played, and obviously I did, reasonably well. And then my actual first team game, we played Hamilton Accies, and I'd been in the squad a couple of times, but again, never thought I'd any chance of getting a game. So the ritual would be, my dad would, come down, park his car, go into the Bonaccord Golf Club. It was just opposite Pittodrie, and I think it was obviously 17 at the time. So I go in there as normal, but the week before, there was a home game, but I was in the locker room with the little kids because I was under 18, and my dad would come through with a bag of crisps and a can of Coke, and I'm in there with all the little kids. The following week, I go to Pittodrie, leave my dad, go to Pittodrie, and then I find out I'm a sub in the first team, and obviously my dad's going to walk across the road to get to the game. And the funny thing is that there was no mobile phone, so I couldn't even tell him. And obviously he got the shock of his life when he saw his son on the bench, and then I think 20 or 30 minutes to go, I came on as a sub. And then after, obviously I still couldn't even talk to him. So after the game, obviously I've got to go back to the golf club to meet my dad. And I go into the back way into the locker, and I quickly got ushered in the front door. He started signing autographs, and somebody bought me a beer. And, I'm still 17, but yeah, a week ago I was in the locker room, and I think my life changed a little bit after that, particularly with Aberdeen being such a small place.
Absolutely, and as you say, it really kicks off a rather trophy-laden career at Aberdeen and at Rangers as well. First few seasons, you're reaching cup finals against Celtic and Rangers. What was the belief in that Aberdeen side, even when you were facing Rangers and Celtic? Because obviously, as you say, so many of those stalwarts from the successful Fergie period we're still there.
Yeah, well, Willie, I was fortunate enough to play with Willie and Willie Miller and Alec McLeish and Jim Leighton. Peter Weir played in front of me, which was excellent. But they had the belief, like you say, they had the belief they could go to Ibrox and Celtic Park and win. And not only just scrape a win convincingly, there was so much belief. Whether you were playing Hamilton or Dunfermline or Rangers Celtic, you expect to win every single game. And they had the belief, even if you drew a game, those three players in particular wouldn't be happy with it, with the situation. And then it helped me a lot because it gave me a bit of belief that, I'm playing a team that can go to these places and win. And to be fair, we did. It was a real experience. Obviously, I was a couple of years, or maybe 3 years later than it was 1986. I made my first team debut. In 1983, they beat Real Madrid. So obviously, I was a little bit later on, but I was still playing with the guys like John Hewitt, and to be honest with you, I used to collect all the Panini stickers, and I was a little bit in awe of all the players, and had to pinch myself that I was actually playing in the same team as those guys.
As you say, so they were all there. And what's it like when you're 17 or whatever, and you're playing beside Willie Miller? Like that guy's a legend.
No, he is. It's quite funny because Willie was always pretty grumpy. Alan McLeish was fantastic with me. He was encouraging, and he would spend a lot of time just talking to me. And because at a young age you're making mistakes and you're costing the team goals, and it's at times you sort of get down a little bit. But Willie would just tell you how it is, and there's a few times that he would play the ball to me, and at times Willie's use of the ball wasn't the best, and he'd pass the ball to me and it would go right over my head. And with him being a legend, he'd point his finger at me, and the Aberdeen supporters would give me a hard time. And obviously, Willie this, Willie that, and it took a long time before I actually sort of stood up for myself and had a go back at him. It took about 3 years, right enough. But it was just fantastic. Like I say, when Aberdeen won that cup in 1976, Willie was actually the captain of the team, and I remember my mum took me to Asda, well, it was Fine Fair then, now Asda. To sign a souvenir brochure, and Willie was there, and I was 8 or 9 years old, and here I was, playing the same team as him, getting shouted at him, and that's the respect that I had for him. Whatever he said, you sort of took it, and eventually you sort of stand up. But Peter Weir for me he played in front, and even though he was coming to the end of his career, he was a fantastic player. But it really helped me, encouraged me to get forward when I was playing as a left back, and I was very, very fortunate that the group of players that I'd been training with them in the school holidays as an S form, but to be honest, I don't know if I was a likeable, quiet kind of likeable guy, but they all took to me and they really helped me, and they went above and beyond and turned a blind eye for all the screw-ups and points that I cost him when I first got in the team.
Not at all, not at all. Well, you certainly made up for it in that like 89-90 season cup double. First one up against Rangers. Total belief that obviously you could go out. I think there'd been defeats in the previous season against them, hadn't there, in the final?
Yeah, we'd lost the previous two. Unfortunately, the first one I broke my foot in the semi-final, couldn't play, so I missed that one. And then the second one, we lost again 3-2. Probably the worst game I had ever had for Aberdeen. I think the occasion was probably too much for me. I was thinking a lot about the game and a lot of nervous energy, and I just felt so tired and drained, and I just had a shocker. So when it came to the third time lucky, we managed to beat Rangers 2-1, and I think Alex Smith was the manager at that point, and he had a lot of belief in the youth. And I think the masterstroke for him that day was he played Ian Jess. I think it was actually his first game, and Rangers didn't know how to deal with him. But after the game, it was an amazing feeling, because obviously I'd been to many cup finals with my dad, watching at hand and watching here I was actually playing and winning, and going up to lift the cup's excellent. But I think the highlight for me was the open top bus, going down Union Street, a fantastic experience. And obviously Rangers, you can't do things like that, but it was just a real dream for me, and obviously another proud moment from my parents to win that game. And again, at that point, Rangers were having their sort of the new revolution of Graham Souness, and it was a fair scalp to actually win that cup final. Obviously, like Sir Willie Miller and McLeish coming to the end of their careers, and Jim Leighton had moved on. So there was a lot of the old players had moved on. So it was almost like a new era, and to go to Glasgow and win was fantastic.
Again, you done it just a matter of months later against Celtic. It'll never go down as one of the greatest finals, though, will it?
No, it was a shocking game. I don't know how it was. I know it was dry and hot, and the pitch was awful, and I think the two teams could still be playing there today and still not score a goal. And it was just a horrendous game. I remember I got a dead leg in extra time. Mike Galloway gave me a sore one, and then it went to penalty kicks. And when it goes to penalty kicks and you're not one of the five to take, you don't think you're going to take. So my leg was seized up, and after the first five, then it was six, and then I looked along, and there wasn't many players left, and with a young guy, Graham Watson, who came on as a sub, and I looked and I thought to myself, I need to, sort of own a man up here a little bit and take one. I can't have him taking one, and I remember I says, I'll take one. I don't know if it was the 8th or 9th penalty kick, and I remember walking up, and I'm thinking, because I'd never really taken a penalty kick since primary school, and I was thinking, like, I've got no clue what I'm going to do here. And I remember walking up, and my leg, I could hardly feel my leg, and I take this 2-step run up. Everybody says it was such a cool penalty kick, but it was because I couldn't run. My leg had totally seized up, and I tried to. My aim was at that point to play it to the Pat Bonner's right hand side, and I step up, and thankfully I mishit it, and it went straight in the middle, because if I hit it, he would have saved it, and my career would probably been finished, because I don't think I could have recovered from the negativity and having cost the club a cup. But when it went in, it was just such a relief. And then obviously, Brian Irvine scores the winner. Theo Snellis has a fantastic save. But it was a bit of an anticlimax. It was great to win the cup, but it was a cup double. It's amazing. Obviously St Johnstone have got a chance to do that this year. So it just shows you how long it's been in Scottish football. But it was a bit of an anticlimax. The celebrations after was a little bit subdued. We did the open top bus again, but it was just as you said, it was just a pretty horrendous game.
A bit of a flat one, wasn't it? How did you find that dynamic of the Smith and Scott duo? You don't see it a lot now, that dual sort of management. I think Ross County had it a few years ago, but what made them probably a little bit more successful than any other sort of managerial duo?
I think I think we all knew that Alex Smith was the sort of manager sort of thing. Obviously they were called co-managers, but they got on well. Alex Smith was great with the young players. Obviously Ian Jess, there was Greg Watson, Scott Booth, Michael Watt, the goalkeeper, Stephen Wright came through. So there's a lot. He encouraged a lot of the young players. Jockey was good with the older ones, because at the end of the day he played with Willie Miller in the team. So he was a hard man. He would have a go. He wasn't scared to have a go at likes of Jim Bett or Charlie Nicholas or something with us. I think Alex Smith maybe wouldn't have done it. But it worked. It was almost like a good cop, bad cop. There was one time we went to Holland, and this was the only time that they ever maybe fell out within pre-season. And I don't know what happened, but they didn't talk to each other. So the staff, they would sit at different tables because they weren't talking to each other. So Jockey was at one, Alex Smith was at the other. And, like so the physio, Davy Wiley, and some of the, like Teddy Scott, some of the coaches, Drew Jarvie, didn't know where to sit. They didn't know if they sat here, well, they're showing favouritism to someone else.
It's like a divorced couple.
It is, yeah. And that lasted for a couple of days, and it was quite funny because I remember I asked Jockey Scott something, and he says, "Well, you better ask him." So, but it was quick. That was the only time there was any issue. But they got on, great. It was a very, very good atmosphere at that point. But we had big players, with Charlie Nicholas and Hans Hillhouse at the club at that point, big personalities and big players, and the board managed to handle them pretty well. As I say, Alec was fantastic with the young players, and Curry. I actually played some of the Scottish youth under-18 games for Alex Smith when he was involved with it. So I knew him quite well, but great with the young players. But Jockey was the grumpy one, he was the one that would always, if things weren't right, he'd always make it known.
Absolutely. And how did you, just coming to the tail end of your time at Aberdeen, how was it carrying on from, like you say, that next sort of generation from the Fergie era? It was mighty successful. It's never really been replicated up in Aberdeen. Did you feel that sort of sea change coming?
Yeah, I think I could see the likes of Alec McLeish maybe getting a little bit frustrated, because I think he was probably the last player. Obviously, Neil Simpson was still there. But apart from those two, it was almost completely changed. And it was the Dutch era came in as well, with a lot of Dutch players that came in. But you could tell that, and obviously the management changed a couple of times. With Jockey and Alex Smith were there. There was still a belief that you could go in a one-off, go to Glasgow and win games. But you always knew Rangers were getting so far ahead at that point as well that we knew that, there's a pretty good chance that you're not going to win the league. Whereas before there was a belief that we possibly could win the league. But it was just totally new players. But we went and competed, and a lot of the times we were second in the league, but we just didn't have enough to get that extra bit. And I think the crowd supporters, Aberdeen supporters can be tough at times, and I think they showed a bit of frustration as well that if we weren't sort of getting over the line, whereas before it was taken for granted that Aberdeen would be there competing all the time.
As you say, Rangers were making strides ahead. When did the sort of speculation for their interest really start to come around?
It was during the time Graham Souness, my contract was coming to an end, and I think it was maybe the January or February that my contract was up, and there was the Bosman rule that if I went to another Scottish club, I'm not sure if it was Scottish and English, I was Scottish, I'd have to go to a tribunal, but if you couldn't go to any other, you could go abroad for nothing. But at that point, I got an agent, Jim MacArthur, and he was, I don't know if he was contacted by Graham Souness, and there was an interest, and eventually it went quite far that we virtually agreed everything. And then shortly after that, I remember in the training bus, I was thinking I'm going to Rangers, and we're going in the minibus to Seaton Park it was at the time, and it was coming back, so we just finished training, and the radio's on, and obviously by this time we were getting close to Rangers. Obviously we ran them close that year in the league, but it was quite funny because we're coming back in the bus and the radio's on, and breaking news, Graham Souness has left Rangers to go to Liverpool, and I virtually had my head in my hands, and all the Aberdeen players were jumping about, singing,
cheering,
and dancing, and cheering, and so that was it was a bit of a concern at that point. But it wasn't until 5 days before the league decider game, when we had to go to Ibrox to draw and to win the league, that I actually agreed. Walter continued the work that Graham Souness was doing, and we met in a car park somewhere and shook hands and agreed to go to Rangers. I think it was about 5 days before my last game for Aberdeen.
So obviously you were aware you were going to Rangers. Was the fans? Was anybody else?
No one knew. I was the only one, obviously, an agent, and thankfully at that point there was no social media and there was no camera. I don't even think there was mobile phones then, so there was no chance of
paparazzi.
Nobody taking pictures of you. So I was the only one that knew, but just the way I was. I mean, I've been asked a lot of times, knowing that I was going there, and if Aberdeen had won, Rangers wouldn't be playing in obviously the qualifiers for the European Cup. It's called in those days. But I still went out and gave everything for my hometown team, and obviously that day we just fell short.
Absolutely. How impressed were you by Walter Smith? Obviously, like you say, you think you're signing for Souness, but then obviously Walter comes along.
Yeah, I mean, I just think as soon as I met the guy, I knew that. I mean, he took over. I'm not sure if he was actually confirmed as the manager or just caretaker for the end of the season. I'm not sure, but he came in and we met him, and he was just great. He obviously spoke highly of me, which having a lack of confidence meant a lot, particularly going to a club like Rangers. And I think at one point we're talking, and my agent I think tried to push it a little bit further to get even more money, or more money than what I was going to get. And at one point I'm sitting in the back of the seat of the car, and he says, right, we'll just keep Stuart Monroe then. And I'm sort of biting my tongue, sitting in the back of the car, thinking, Jim, just shut up, just accept it. But luckily enough, it was all done, and it was an exciting time for me, to be honest.
As you say, so at Aberdeen, you're the fan, you're the Aberdonian. What's it like walking into that Rangers dressing room? At that time especially, there were a lot of like Rangers men, as you would say.
Yeah, well, I felt that when I went there, I was all excited, and obviously being a shy Aberdonian, when you actually think, like, okay, it's a couple of months until I actually have to go, and I stayed in a hotel in Glasgow the night before I go in, and I parked my car around the corner from Ibrox, not knowing what time they're getting. I'm thinking I don't want to go in too early because I'll have to talk to a lot of people. In fact, I don't want to be in too late. So I went in, and it's just totally different to going into Pittodrie. Pittodrie, you go in the back door. Ibrox, you go in in those days there was no training park or anything. You go in the double doors, beside the staircase, and stand. There's a commissioner there with a uniform on. Stan, alerts Jimmy Bell. He comes and takes me, and I'll never forget walking down that corridor. I'm thinking, what am I doing? And if somebody had said to me, you can jump back in your car and drive home, I would have done it, because I was absolutely petrified going in. And I remember when I go in, the first people I see it was Kuznetsov and Mikhailichenko. Mark Walters was there, Terry Hurlock, Haitley. Then you've got Gary Stevens, Trevor Stephen, and you just think to yourself, I shouldn't be here. I don't belong here. And then Jimmy Bell tells me, okay, you're sitting here, you're changing here. It was number 6, and there was no squad number. It was only like a training number. And he says to me, "You've got big shoes to fill. That's Terry Butcher's number." And I thought, oh, great. I was already a bag of nerves anyway without him telling me that. And then I sat down. Lucky enough, Richard Gough, he was number 5. I was number 6. Ian Ferguson was number 7. So, and obviously, unfortunately, or fortunate, I don't know, I was in the lively corner with McCoist and Haitley, and we're close to it. And I kept myself pretty quiet for 6 years in case they had a go at me. But Goffey was fantastic. He sort of really took me under his wing a little bit. Goffey is as much as of a leader he is, he's quite quiet himself. He'll talk obviously, but he's not a storyteller or things like that. And I was very fortunate that I changed next to him. And I'm still in touch with him now. So he's always been a great person to sort of bounce things off.
Like you say, obviously, Richard Gough, everyone like says that powerhouse and a leader at the back. But on the other side, as you say, Ian Ferguson, do you think he was quite underrated throughout his career?
Yeah, I've said that a lot. I think he was probably one of the best players that I've played with at all the clubs I was at. And it's weird. It's funny because you get the John Brown, Ian Durrant, Alan McCoist, the real Rangers men. But Ian Ferguson is one of them, but he seems to get overlooked, and I think a lot of it's to do with. He scored a lot of important goals, but I think he's one of those players that if he's not playing, you notice he's not there. But when he is playing, you don't notice him. It's a hard thing to explain. But I've always said he's a real, under sort of never got the credit he deserved. And it was quite funny because he persuaded me to buy a house where he was staying, and I then realised it was a bit of a con because. It was a new development of Calla Homes, and later on I saw he got his driveway redone, and I think that was the enticement. If you got somebody to buy a house, he'd get his driveway done. So I think That's why he tried to get me to buy
Getting
a
all the
house.
deals done, exactly.
Exactly.
What
Then I couldn't get rid of the house after that. So
you're stuck there. You're stuck there.
yeah.
What was it like? Obviously, you walk into that Rangers side. I think was it 3 in a row they'd already completed. What was it like walking into that? And obviously, even at that time, there was that expectation, sorry, to continue that run.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But again, there was no talk of 8, 9 in a row or 10 in a row and all that in those days. But I think I quickly found out that at Rangers that you have to win. You have to win the league, you have to win the League Cup, you have to win the Scottish Cup, and you could tell the supporters are they're quite they're loyal, they're demanding, they get behind the team, and it wasn't a case of we might win the league; it was a case of you have to win the league. And then you look around at the dressing room, and you've got top internationals in that team. You've got the 2 Russians that hardly ever played, so it just shows how strong the team was. And Ali McCoy did say to me that you don't. It's not until January that Rangers go top of the league. We've always such slow starters. And a few times he would say to me, he said a couple of times that don't worry about things. It's where we are in January, and he's right enough. We were maybe second or even third early part of the season, and then come January you're getting close to the top, and then you just take just blow teams away after that.
That instilled belief amongst them is unreal, isn't it? Just that confidence, like you say, you can even be sitting second, third, and the confidence is so high and so there.
Well, there was games where we would be a goal down, 2 goals down, and we would know that we're going to win. There was never, and I think Walter Smith was fantastic that way, that he never showed any pressure. He never showed any pressure at the players because it's his first managerial job, and to go to a club like Rangers, the pressure, the microscope he's under, he never ever showed it. He kept all that away from the players, and whether it was a Champions League game, a cup final, playing Partick Thistle away, it was just the same. He was even the whole time, and I think that's what made that special. But again, you look at the team, that particularly in the early part, you get guys like Gorham, Gough, John Brown, Gary Stevens, Stuart McCall, Ian Ferguson, McCoy, Haitley, just guys that are just workers and winners. And there was no way that if things were going against us that it would affect us. It was just it was an incredible atmosphere, and I think it was almost a team that never knew how to lose, if you know what I mean. We just kept going, and when teams get a bit of daylight on us, we still always caught them up.
You touched upon there those Champions League days. That first Champions League sort of season, and it was like the 2 league format, then going straight to the final. How much belief was there that obviously you could go on and have won that?
I don't know. I think it was just a case of we were the first British team to qualify. Obviously, we beat Lyngby and Leeds United. Obviously, beating Leeds United gave us a massive boost. But I think we went into that for the experience as opposed to we're going to win it. Domestically, you play each game, that League Cup, Scottish Cup, that you have to win every game. There's no excuses. I think in the European Cup or the Champions League, there was no. I don't think there was any pressure on us. On the inside certainly, and obviously social media wasn't big, so there wasn't a lot going on. So that was always kept away from you. And then obviously you're drawn against Marseille and Bruges and CSKA Moscow, and it was an exciting time because you're not playing the same teams you play 4 times a week, and it's actually a league. It's not like a couple of games and it's a knockout. So you've got a lot of good things to look forward to, and I think that helped us domestically because we end up playing. I don't know how many games it was that season. It's a hell of a lot of games, but the games were like Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, and all you did was, at times we hardly trained because you were so tired, and there was no squad rotation. We had a limited squad. You had to play every game. There was one time we played Bruges away, and then we came back and played Arbroath in the Scottish Cup 3 days later, and it was the same team that played. So there was no, somebody's tired or got a wee knock or something. You have to play. But I think everybody wanted to play back then. But the European games was really, really special, and like everything was an experience. Obviously that format totally different, and there was no expectations. And it wasn't until we went to Marseille in the 5th game, I think it was, that we thought to ourselves, right, okay, we've got a chance here to to go and do something. I think if he'd won that game, we'd have been in the final. So we got so close, but I think maybe the way it was approached, every game was the same. It really helped us.
As you say, there's special nights in the Champions League, but how did you find obviously played against them at Aberdeen, but the games against Celtic?
Well, they were obviously incredible. I mean, no one tells you what to expect in an Old Firm game, but the one thing I remember is, when you play at Ibrox, no matter who you're playing against, if it's a full house, the first 20 minutes you can't hear your teammates. And when you go to an Old Firm game, you can't hear your teammates for 90 minutes. So you're almost on your own. You can shout at a player, he doesn't hear you. Goffey can shout and tell me there's a man on me or a man, coming on my shoulder or whatever. But you can't hear it. And I remember when we used to go and play at the old jungle, I would, obviously on my side, I would take the throw-ins, and the amount of times that I'd go and pick up the ball. For some reason, ball boys never got them when it was at the jungle, and the ball's right beside the fence, and I'd go there and they're spitting on me. And I remember one game in particular, after the game, the hair was just totally solid with just phlegm and spit and what have you. So it was an experience, to say the least. And then obviously the first 5-10 minutes is almost like a free for all. You could go wherever you. In those days, you'd want to sort of make your mark on whoever you're playing against, and you got away with it 9 times out of 10. You got away with it, and you could maybe put a bit of doubt in the winger's mind. But obviously that days have changed now. But it was a great experience. But the one thing I remember was that you obviously couldn't hear anything, but it passed so quick. Before you knew it was half time, and you thought, we've only played 20 minutes here.
As you said there, obviously you have that 5-10 minute period just to get yourself into the game. What about that crunch against Joe Miller?
Well, Joe and myself, we're still, I suppose, good friends. I suppose haven't seen it for a number of years. Yeah, but when we were at Aberdeen, we were actually roommates at Aberdeen, and we both lived there together, and I think we're about a year difference in age. He's a year older. But Archie Knox would always wind me up when we played against Joe Miller and says, look, come on, you better make sure you sort him out in the first 5 minutes. And okay, it took me 6 minutes that night. But because he's a friend, you just don't want him to get the better of you. And I would always, the first fight, maybe I'm ashamed to say it, I don't know, but whoever I played against, you want to try and get a good third on them pretty early on. And that night, Joe, he was about 10-15 yards away, and he knocked the ball past me, and for some reason I decided that here's my chance, and instead of, it wasn't feet, it was like a shoulder, and
it's like a body check, eh? So
yeah, well, sort of, yeah. I think I broke his ribs that night as well, but really? It was quite funny, because I remember when you look back on it, obviously it's on YouTube, Terry Butcher's saying, it's an incredible decision. But I think in today's game, you probably end up going to jail for that, It just shows how it's changed, and it's quite comical. But that game in itself was horrendous. Well, it was horrendous after that, because I had to go in the dressing room, because obviously you can't stay out. And quite funny, because it was Old Hampden, and you could hear the noise on the roof, the wooden floor, and you could tell there was a goal. And obviously there's no TVs in the dressing room, and that. I obviously thought Celtic scored, but wee Doddy came in and said that Coisty had scored, so it made me feel better. But then the second half, they took me. These security guards took me up to the in the stand, and they surrounded me. I don't know what they thought I was going to do, if I was going to jump on the pitch or whatever. I don't know, but I thought I'd been arrested. But it was quite funny, because that night after that, it was pouring rain, and Celtic were hitting the post, hitting the bar. The goalie again had a fantastic game, kept us in the game, and I was probably the most relieved person in the stadium after that went to the final whistle. But a lot of people have said that was the making of the team, of Walter Smith's team, because of the 10 men for 84 minutes in a Scottish Cup semi-final at Hampden, and we still managed to win, and we actually did it again. I think it was the following season. Peter Hooster got sent off early on, and we beat Celtic 1-0. I think Haitley scored in a League Cup game at Ibrox. So I think that was the making of the team. It was a real nerve-wracking night for me, but I often wonder, if we'd lost, what would have happened. Again, it's a little bit like the way I was as a player. If I'd missed Yeah, like if I'd missed the penalty kick in the Scottish Cup final for Aberdeen, or if we'd lost that game, my career might have been totally different. And I think that's how quickly the game can flip.
Obviously, other than Joe Miller, who did you sort of relish coming up against at Celtic?
I used to love playing against Paulo Di Canio. I loved it just because his personality, and you could get inside his head. You could have a real clatter at him early on, and sometimes you'd lose it. And it was one time we were playing at Celtic Park, and it was 5 minutes to go, and I was absolutely knackered. My legs had totally gone, and he had the ball at the byline, and he was doing all these step overs and tricks and whatever, and you could actually just walk past me. Because I was that dead, and he actually stood on the ball, fell over, and the ball went out for a goal kick. So he made a bit of a fool of himself that night. But it was quite funny because I think the second game I played for Leeds United, he'd actually gone to Sheffield Wednesday then, so I had a chance to play against him again, which I really enjoyed him because he was a superstar and he was outspoken, and you know what I mean. But he was easily wound up.
Easily wound up, exactly.
Oh, definitely. But there was one player I played. He seemed to follow me everywhere. You probably haven't heard of him. A guy, Ivo Den Beeman. He played it. I first came up against him at Montrose in a pre-season game, and I was at Aberdeen, and he ripped me apart. Then he ended up going to Dundee and Falkirk and Dunfermline, and every time I played against him, I couldn't deal with him. I don't even think he knew what he was doing. But it got to a point where in a season he'd sort of get transferred, and the first game he played for that new club, I was always playing against him. I'd be a normal day, a normal week. Oh, we've got to play this weekend. And Friday, Ivo Den Beeman signed for Dundee, and you think, oh God, we're playing him tomorrow, because I knew it was coming. I had no clue what to do.
It's unreal, eh? As you say, obviously you did eventually make that move down to Leeds. How did that all come about? Obviously, Rangers have just won 9 titles in a row. I know you said obviously amongst you weren't thinking about it, but you had to have been thinking about that 10.
After the 8th title, I think we all believed, probably before the Gascoigne game when he scored 3 against Aberdeen, I think we began to realise that things are going to be pretty good there. Then obviously we won the 9 in a row, but just before the January, I think it was a January window had opened up, and I'd actually, Walter Smith and the agent of obviously Inter Milan were going to sign me.
Right.
So I was going to go there. Roy Hodgson was a manager at the time, but then they played and they lost a game, and he was told that all signings are on hold, and then they drew the next game, and that was it. But after that, there was a lot of interest in Italy from Napoli and Sampdoria, Torino, and then there was interest from Atletico Madrid, Valencia. It was a lot of it, and then one weekend we had a free weekend, so myself, my wife, and my agent Jim went across to Italy and spoke to a few teams, Lazio and what have you. But during that time, George Graham was phoning the agent, asking me to go to Leeds United and what have you. And eventually he just sort of, I think it's his persistence and his sales pitch ended up, going there. But I felt leaving Rangers, I'd had 6 good years there. I played, obviously you play each team 4 times, sometimes 5 times, and there's only so many times you can come and play against, Maurice Malpass and, it's the same players you play against week in, week out, same stadiums. So I thought it was time for a change, and being 27, 28, probably my last chance. And then I thought, Walter, I didn't really think too much about the 10 in a row, but I just had a feeling that Walter would leave at some point in the next year or so. And if I was going to sign, it would be maybe 2 or 3 years. 4 years if I got a testimonial, but I think I got offered 3 years to stay. But I just felt that I'd had such a great time there, maybe the last chance to move on. Walter might not be there. And then I thought, if Walter left, then obviously I didn't want to be a player stuck in the reserves. Yeah. And it just showed you, I think it was Dick Advocat had came in after that, and obviously Arthur Newman and all these big names came in. So I thought it was the right time to move on, but obviously I found out pretty quickly it wasn't the right thing to do.
Just before we get on to that, how proud you obviously, what a contribution you made to that Rangers 9 in a row side and the Champions League and everything in between, all the, like we say, a trophy lads in career, because Oh, you kind of are one of the unsung heroes of that side. You, even though they weren't there for that long, you still, from the 90s, you just think Gascoigne, McCoist obviously was a mainstay, even Brian Laudrup, obviously they are big, massive names, but David Robertson, how many appearances did you make?
I think it was 250 for Rangers, and I think during the nine in a row, I think I'm in the top 4 or 5 appearances. I'd play with injuries, and I was very fortunate. I didn't miss too many games, and
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough that Walter Smith had a lot of faith in me, but I think because it was more so that the maybe fourth, fifth, and 6 years there that at that point I think the foreign rule had been lifted, and at that point Rangers could sign anybody they wanted.
Anybody?
Obviously there was money, and that gave me confidence. But I knew that I had to play, even with injuries. I had to play, otherwise they could be looking for someone else. And but no, it's been great, and I don't think you really appreciate winning the medals, because I used to give the medals to my wife. She'd put it in a box somewhere, and it's not until you move house you realise, God, I've actually done okay here, because
Quite
you
a
don't want to
few.
put them on show anyway. Yeah, and then I've actually just done an autobiography that's came out, and a lot of the coaches and players that I played with at Rangers and Aberdeen, obviously spoke about me, and obviously a lot of good things, and as a player and as a person and what have you. And I just wish I'd known that when I played, because I didn't think I was any good, and I didn't. I thought I was just one of these. I thought I was invisible that just came in and played, and almost like somebody that won the raffle to go and play for Rangers and Aberdeen. Just somebody who was there. I didn't have a lot of good things to say about myself
Yeah.
as a player. So no, it was great, and I'm just thankful that Celtic didn't win the 10, because the 9 in a row would be totally forgotten, and my sort of claim to fame would be
Your
gone.
claim to fame, exactly. So as you say, obviously you make that move down to Leeds with George Graham. How impressed were you by Ellen Road, obviously, and just the size of the club? It's a massive club, and obviously right back to where they should be right now.
Yeah, it's. I remember the only time I'd ever been there was when we played. Rangers played Leeds in the qualifiers for the Champions League, and I just thought it was great, like a real family club. But obviously, yeah, it's a fantastic stadium, and the support's great. Very similar to Rangers. I remember we played Manchester United, and I was walking in getting out of the car, walking in, and one of the supporters says to me, he says, "Look," he says, "I don't care if you don't win another game this season, but just make sure you beat Man United today." Fortunate enough, we did. But no, it was a good club. I just think for me it was maybe the wrong move. Just obviously the way that I was later on asked to play, and then obviously I found out during the medical that, because the deal almost fell through because I had an injury that I wasn't aware of. I had no cruciate ligament ACL. That I found out in the medical the day I signed. So fortunate enough, George Graham, was going away on holiday, and he just wanted the deal done, so that got done. But I think, I'd played 5 years with. I didn't even know that I'd damaged my ACL. I wasn't told, and I managed to play. But as soon as I knew, I started to limp. And then at pre-season, my knee was sore, and I had to get an injection, which is so strange, because I started to,
Psychologically.
yeah. Once I knew that was it, and I think I was only 70% fit. George Graham was great at the start, and I was actually playing pretty well. We played Arsenal and had a good start to the season, and then he tried to change the way I defended and how I played, and being 28, it's very, very difficult to change how you are. I found, people talk about sports science and everything. That sort of things were beginning to creep in, and being 28, I found it very difficult to do it, because at Rangers, because we played so many games, a lot of the times, like on a Friday, I wouldn't train. I would just go in the gym and go on the bike and stretch and make sure I was okay. But there, and Walter would also let experienced players do their own thing, maybe do less pre-season, less training. But that wasn't the case at Leeds. You all had to do the same. I think he had this rule, George Graham, that if you were injured, you had to train on the Tuesday, or you wouldn't play on the Saturday. Which was obviously, it's the way he did it. And a couple of times, it was the first time we did, I think 2 days a week we did afternoon sessions, and I found it hard, and obviously I had that injury at the back of my mind all the time, and I just, when I played in games, even the warm up at Rangers, you did your own warm up. We go to Leeds United as an organised warm up, So I didn't feel right, because I've been doing the same thing for, the best part of 10, 12 years. So I found it very, very difficult. The whole experience there was hard. And then obviously when you go and play there, you're playing against Beckham and Giggs and Overmars and all those guys, and you have to be at your best. And and I fell short a little bit.
You almost regret maybe not going, obviously, at times, in hindsight, it's a wonderful thing, but do you wish maybe you had that opportunity a little bit earlier on in your career, like you say, to face Beckham, Giggs still at your peak?
Yeah, I would have. But I think if I was fit, I mean, I did. To be fair, I did okay against those teams. It was later on, as the season went on, I wasn't really allowed to go forward. I had to defend a different way, and I just didn't enjoy it. And then obviously I had my knee finally gave way, which in a way it's a little bit of a relief. But I actually wish, having coached abroad and stuff, I actually wish that at that point I'd taken the chance to go abroad. Even though my knee, I probably would have failed a medical abroad, but I'd like to have played abroad.
But bit of a miss one, isn't it? So obviously Graham leaves. Is it a bit of a relief maybe when George Graham leaves? Like you say, perhaps maybe his style wasn't fitting for you.
Well, I was in a bad way injury wise at that point. I'd had surgery at the end of my first year, and I was coming back. I played the last couple of games in the league season. And the following year, pre-season, first day of pre-season, my knee was just not any good. So I had to get my knee reconstructed, which took a year. And by that time, Ian Hart was in the team. David O'Leary was the manager. With Eddie Gray was one of the best coaches. He actually helped me a lot, motivation and keep me on track kind of thing. But obviously O'Leary, a lot of the young guys, your Woodgates and Harry Kewell and Stephen McPhail, Ian Hart, all those guys were now, and obviously they'd brought in Mark Viduka and David Batty came back, Ferdinand was there. So they were getting bigger and better all the time. And I knew that if I was going to play again, I'd have to find somewhere else. And it came to a point where O'Leary had his own way of doing things. And I wouldn't even, when I was at some kind of fitness, he didn't even play me in the reserves. Yet I was told to go and find a club. And hadn't played for 18 months, so it's very difficult. And going to sign you. So so they began to play me in some reserve games, and I actually went to Barnsley. I was meant to go there on loan, so I went to train, and I went and played a game. Played against Kevin Colban against Sunderland, and I must have done okay. It's the first game I played for proper game for maybe 14 months or so. And then I remember I was in the bath the day after, and my knee was like a balloon, because it was the first real sort of physical game that I had to play in. And they were in the Championship at the time. Dave Bassett was the manager. So Dave Bassett called my agent and says, okay, we want to take him on loan to end the season. So Jim told me that. And I said, this was maybe the Tuesday or something. He says, when's the next game? Friday. When's the next game after that? Monday. And I looked at my knee and I thought, there's no way I can do it. So it was all agreed by Leeds. And obviously the next day I walked into Thorpe Arch, the training ground, to a little bit of shock that I was still at the club. And then I just kept, playing away, played a few games in the reserves. And one thing that sort of was really disappointing was, come the end of my time, just before it was all over kind of thing at Leeds, Eb Scovdale at Aberdeen and Jockey Scott both come to watch me play, and they were going to take me either to Dundee or Aberdeen. And to be honest, I'd love to have gone and finished my career at Aberdeen, but my knee was in such a state that I was almost like a horse waiting to get shot. It's just a case of when the surgeon told me, look, you can't play at that level anymore, it was almost a relief more than anything, because I struggled for the best part of 2 years. I'd make some kind of comeback, and then my groins would go, my ankle would go, something else would go. It was miserable that last 2 years.
You say it's miserable, sorry. I mean, the enjoyment's taken out, and as you say, it's more a relief that it's actually came to that end. Was the plan always to get into management, obviously keeping your foot really in that door?
No, it wasn't. I'd actually, during the last maybe 6 months of my career at Leeds, or my time at Leeds, I did a little bit of community coaching, a little bit, but it wasn't really for me. But I also started a computer company in Wetherby. that I did for possibly about a year. So we used to sort of recycle redundant IT equipment. We'd go to London and we'd collect it all. We'd recycle the monitors, with this machine that would break it down to glass and copper, and then obviously we'd rework the computers. We did a contract with the government to supply refurbished computers for the single parents and unemployed. So we did that. So that was good. But it was a short-lived experience because the cost of new computers came down quite a lot. So, but then by that time I was itching to get back into the football in some way. And it was funny. I went to Thailand and Vietnam with Leeds, just doing a bit of coaching there. And it wasn't really my thing. I didn't have any coaching licenses or anything. And then but I just missed the winning and losing and the day-to-day stuff in our football club. So I ended up playing some charity games and over there, and then I did a few with Leeds, the Leeds legends, Peter Lorimer, who's no longer with us, and but all those guys were like 20 years older than me, and I felt I was running about playing like Pele, and I thought I could make a comeback. So I knew an old friend, John Sheeran, a friend that knew John Sheeran. He was alerted that I was maybe able to play again, do a little bit of coaching. So I ended up going to Montrose, and really that was the start of where I began to coach. I know John took me there as a player more than anything, and after about 9 games I started my Achilles tendon, so I really knew that the playing part was over.
It was just the
coaching. And then I was like the player coach. There was John Sheeran and Davy Larter was the assistant, and then I moved to, fortunate enough, Dennis Miller at Elgin, who was I think he was the vice chairman at Aberdeen when I was there, asked me to go to Elgin to be the manager there, and that's when it all started. That's when I started to do coaching badges and what have you, and obviously being at Elgin was a real eye opener when you show up your first night of training on the Tuesday and you realise that there's only 7 players there. Some of them are in Glasgow, some of them are in an island somewhere, and that was being used to the luxury treatment in the Premier League in Scotland and the Premiership in England. Never really having any involvement with part-time and semi-pro football. It really opened my eyes up as to how difficult that part of it is, and how much the players put in time and effort. I admire those guys because I know a lot of them, they don't get great money, but they're playing for the love of the game. Yet they've got a 9-to-5 job, sometimes shift work. And they've also got a family at the weekend that they're travelling all over Scotland. It's just it's an amazing commitment those guys have got.
Absolutely. Does it give you almost that state of like being humble that you're like, wow, I was quite privileged, like you say, starting about hotel to hotel, or Aberdeen, Rangers, travelling Europe, and like you say, these guys are working a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, well, I didn't even, you take it all for granted. Rangers, before each Scottish Cup final, the club would take us to Monte Carlo for 5 days or something, and everything's paid for. And you just think that, we'd actually go, we'd fly from Heathrow to Nice, and I think the bus journey from Nice to Monte Carlo is, I think it's maybe 2 or 3 hours. I don't know how long it is. But anyway, the club would put us on helicopters, and it would take 6 minutes. So like a convoy helicopter. So at the time you don't realise how lucky the experience is and what have you until you end up there, and you end up, like at Elgin, you're working with a budget. Even the travelling, you've got cut costs all the time. And I found that any time you actually begin to do well, a player leaves to a better club. And even just the travelling, I remember we'd go from Elgin to play Gretna, and the bus would leave at Elgin because you get guys from Inverness. Alec Bow and David Hind would travel from Inverness to Elgin, got on the bus, and the bus would come down to Aberdeen, pick guys up in Aberdeen, pick guys up in Dundee, pick them up in Perth. Then you'd all go for a pre-match meal in Moffat. It's just, but the guys like from Inverness would maybe start their day at 5:30 in the morning, and you don't realise all that things. You look at the the scores in the newspaper on you think, oh, here's Elgin playing at Gretna, and then sometimes you have to play midweek games in, Queen of the South and stuff like that. It was just horrendous, and you can never get the team together. It's almost a case of you've just got to hope that it works on the weekend.
Aye. I'd like to say that's you don't take into consideration, like you say, Elgin, Gretna, and it's just all those little things. Would you obviously that was your last managerial stint in Scotland, would you come back?
I would, yeah. I'd like to come back at some point. Although, the job I've got in India is almost like the perfect job. It's just in the wrong place. I've got a fantastic owner. The club started from virtually nothing when I first arrived. But I'd love the opportunity to come back to Scotland. Obviously, being away from home is hard. Probably the longest I'm away is about 8 or 9 months from home. And, because of the league season, it's very difficult to get a break to come back. So, I'm not getting any younger and, I'm probably one of the few people that have actually enjoyed the lockdown, just being at home.
Absolutely.
I've enjoyed it. Things pass quick for me. Both lockdown. Well, it's been a total lockdown. But I would love the opportunity at some point to come back to Scotland.
As you say, everybody sort of knows that you're out in India, especially since the documentaries. But just before you went there, you spent a bit of time in America. How did you find that?
Yeah, I was there for 10 years. It was great, and at the end, it becomes too much. I mean, we were fortunate enough. We lived in Phoenix, so it's sunshine all year round. It gets to about 115 degrees in the height of summer. It was a fantastic, with a lovely house with a pool, and obviously living the life, barbecues every day, and a lot of entertaining, which was great. I originally went there through a guy called Les Armstrong and Ali Maxwell, who was there at the time. And the idea there was to coach 3 teams. I think I had an under-18 team, an under-16 team, an under-14 team. And I enjoyed it. You'd go and play in tournaments, and you play at Disney in Florida, you'd play in Vegas, you'd play in, California, other like San Francisco, Seattle. You play in the East Coast. There's a lot of traveling, seeing a lot of places, which was fantastic. The idea is to get the kids, boys and girls, into college soccer scholarships. So I was doing that, and I enjoyed it. And then quickly after that, Les and Ali decide to leave to another club. And before I know it, I'm the director of coaching. I then become the executive director. So you end up, your life's totally submerged in the club. They've got offices. I mean, when I took over, there was 350 kids, and I ended up raising it to 3,500 kids. And it just became very, very difficult to manage. You still have to coach your 3 teams because you still need to be seen and have a bit of support from parents. But my day would be, I'd go into the office at 8 o'clock to about maybe 3:30. I'd go home for half an hour, then go to training from 4:30 to 10 o'clock at night, and that's almost every day. And then weekends, if you're playing in tournaments, sometimes you're coaching 9 games a day, which is almost impossible because you end up. It just shows you the kids don't listen to you because you'll end up giving them a team talk or a halftime talk, and you're talking about the previous game or something. So you can tell that they don't really. So it became a little bit too much. And then I did Phoenix FC Wolves, which is now Phoenix Rising, where Didier Drogba's at. So we started that club, and there was some financial issues and lawsuits, and but that really sort of got my appetite back into professional football. And but the experience was great, but it just ended up your life. I'm not saying it wasn't worth living, but it was just constant. You couldn't actually enjoy. It was so cutthroat as well. Even in the summertime, you would think that the kids are off school, season's finished, but you got to have tryouts, and if your team or a team wasn't the best team, the best player would go to the next best team, and then all your team would go, or a coach would leave and take it. And a team is probably worth about $25,000 to the club to pay salaries and all sorts. So it became pretty tedious, and it got to a point where you had to keep the teams playing during the summer. You had to keep them training, otherwise, if you gave them a week off, they'd go and sign for another team. And that's how cutthroat the whole thing was. And it just, after I was there for 10 years, it just takes everything out of you, sucks the life out of you.
You see, obviously, the kids didn't really listen to your team talks, and as I mentioned, we've all watched the documentary. Do the guys in India really listen to your team talks?
I think well, at the start they obviously couldn't understand, but they know. It's quite funny because some of them actually swear now. They're not meant to.
It's after that documentary.
Exactly. But it's hard because when I first went there, there was I'm not saying I was sold a bill of goods, but I got there and there was no with a pitch. It's still the same AstroTurf pitch it is now, same sort of stadium, but there was no floodlights, no dressing rooms. The team didn't have basically training kits. Some of them were wearing leather jackets to train in. It was just no balls. It was just no infrastructure, nothing, and the frustrations just got worse and worse. And against all odds, we've been successful, and now the club's sponsored by Adidas. We've got floodlights, we've got dressing rooms. We fly to all the games. I mean, every away game that we have is 2 flights. I mean, sometimes it takes 2 days to get anywhere. And when we first started, there's maybe 100, 200 people came to the games, and now the stadium holds 14,000, but sometimes we'll get 20,000 in. There was 26,000 at one of the games. But you're just passionate, and as I say, I'm proud of what's been achieved, not just by me, but the whole group that's been a part of it. And obviously the documentaries. There's meant to be another series coming in the UK. There's a Bollywood movie being made in India. Just a lot of PR, and I think it's obviously down to the area, the logistics of in the day-to-day life in Kashmir. It's a real tough place to be in a lot of the times, and you see a lot of they're fantastic people, the Kashmiris, and they've been great with me, but you can just tell that there's in Srinagar, the capital, there's no movie theatre, there's no fast food. If you want, in the airport, there's only just recently the airport's got a Pizza Hut and a KFC. So I think the logic is that you'd have to actually buy a ticket and go through security to have a KFC and come out the other side. But there's absolutely nothing. I mean, it's a beautiful place up in the mountains in the Himalayas, and places like Gulmarg. It's a fantastic place. It's been a real experience for me. And as I say, you asked me the question, would I come back here? And yeah, I would, but it'd be very, very difficult to leave the place. I mean, I must admit, when I first went there, I couldn't wait to come back. It was just horrendous. But now it's almost like a second home now. And, when you say that to people, they think that you're daft. Even some of the players that have gone and played there, there's nothing. Sometimes there's been an incident and maybe an attack, or people have been killed, and the government have got the ability to a flick of a switch to switch the internet off. So when you're trying to do WhatsApp to contact home, and it just spins around, and that can last for days. I think it was that last season before, there was an Article 370, which gave the people of Kashmir special status compared to the rest of India, because Kashmir used to be its own country, and obviously it's governed by India now, and that decision caused a lot of issues, and there was some problems, and and it got to a point where the internet was switched off and all landlines were switched off, so no one could contact anyone. And it was the first day that we started in Kolkata with a tournament, and the Kashmiris players, who are very, very homely people, and family is everything to them, they couldn't contact home, and there's obviously a fear for their family's safety. And it was amazing because during that time, my son Jordan came over to India. We're in Kolkata, went to Mumbai, but we're filming a documentary. So Greg wanted to do something in Ladakh, in Tibet. So we flew there, but Jordan's flight had originally been going to be leaving from Srinagar for him to go home. So I had to get a flight to Srinagar, and obviously Jordan, for him to make sure he got on his flight okay. And I remember talking to one of the guys that were at the airport waiting for a flight to go to Mumbai. He played in one of the local teams, so I knew him. And I said to him, "So why are you back here for?" And he says, when all this lockdown and everything happening, I couldn't get in touch with my family. I didn't know if they were okay, if they were still alive. So the only way I could do, and he worked in the IT sector, so he said, I had to get a flight home, knock on the door to see if they're okay. because there's just absolutely no way of communication or anything.
Jeez.
And he says, so my idea was I was going to stay there for a couple of weeks. He says, but I had to leave after a day because there's no internet. So he went away back there, and he says, and now, even now, he's only back for 2 days. He didn't even know how
It's
he
just
can
the same
find
cycle
it.
again, exactly.
Yeah, and then that must have lasted for about 4 or 5 weeks.
Jeez, oh. It is a totally different life, as you say. And if when you do get out there, it is just so crucial to stay safe. And I certainly look forward to another documentary. But you mentioned earlier on, you have got a new autobiography out. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it all started in well, there was actually a couple of attempts before previous years, and it never really sort of got off the ground. A couple of people approached me before, but Alistair Aird, just when I got back from India last year after being stuck in Kashmir for 49 days in a lockdown, he approached me just by a message, asked if I'd be interested in doing it, and I think because of the lockdown, there wasn't a lot going on, decided to do it, and as I say, it's been a great experience because he does all the research. He knows more about me than I know about myself. He'd find out about games that I'd played at under 18s and 17s and tournaments I didn't even know I played in. But his attention to detail has been fantastic. And that's it. It's been great. I think it was done in 6 months. So it's out now. It came out the end of March, I think it is. So I think it's available on Amazon. And I don't know. I think it's been difficult now because normally they're in bookstores. I'm not sure how all that's working. But as I say, it's a fantastic experience. But I think the best part for me was, like I said earlier, was finding out what players thought about me. And as I say, I think if I knew that when I was playing at Rangers and Aberdeen, I think I might end up being a better player than I was because, like I say, I didn't think I was that good, to be honest.
It's remarkable. David, thank you so much for chatting to us. Like we say, everybody knows all about Kashmir and the documentaries, but it's really interesting to hear, like you say, about your playing days. And you might have not had the confidence in yourself, but it's certainly evident now that 250 odd appearances for Rangers and a 9 in a row campaign, that's not too shabby, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not too bad. I'm a very fortunate guy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me, David. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you.